The sterile corridors of Forrester Creation seemed colder today than usual. Dick Sharp moved through them like a ghost, carefully placing his personal items into a cardboard box, a ritual he never thought he'd have to perform. Just hours ago, his career had come to a sudden, crushing halt when Steffy made it clear that Thomas's return was non-negotiable and his position at Hope for the Future was obsolete. The decision had been made without consultation, without consideration, and worst of all, without any real explanation beyond a vague assertion that the line needed a strong reboot. As he gathered the last of his sketches and design notes, Dick couldn't help but replay the conversation with Hope. The disappointment in her eyes had mirrored his own. She'd fought for him, advocated for his talent, but even her voice carried no weight against the Forrester family's iron will. Now, standing in the office he'd briefly occupied, he felt the sting of professional rejection settling deep in his chest. This wasn't just about a job. This was about proving himself in an industry that had never given him a chance before. Seeking solace at Il Giardino, with nowhere else to turn and his heart heavy with frustration, Dick made his way to Il Giardino. The restaurant had become a refuge of sorts, a place where his father Deacon worked, where he could at least find a sympathetic ear. Deacon had always understood struggle, had lived through his own share of professional disappointments and comebacks. As Dick pushed through the doors of the upscale establishment, he hoped for nothing more than some fatherly advice and perhaps a moment of respite from the chaos of the fashion world. Deacon, wiping down the bar with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to move through life with grace despite its hardships, immediately sensed his son's distress. The slump in Dick's shoulders, the hollow expression in his eyes, these told a story that needed no elaboration. Without pressing too hard, Deacon let Dick unburden himself, listening as his son vented about Steffy's cold professionalism, Thomas's convenient return, and the devastating swiftness with which his dreams had been dismantled. The worst part, Dick said, his voice carrying an edge of bitterness, is that they didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. Ridge and Steffy made the decision together, and Hope had to be the one to deliver the bad news. It feels like I was nothing to them, just a temporary placeholder until the real talent came back. Deacon offered what comfort he could, reminding his son that setbacks in this industry weren't personal failures, but rather the nature of the business. Still, even his words of wisdom couldn't penetrate the fog of disappointment that surrounded Dick. As he prepared to leave, Deacon made an offer a job at Il Giardino if Dick needed temporary work while he figured out his next move. It was a lifeline, though not the one Dick had hoped for. The overheard conversation. As Dick cleared out his office, moving methodically through the motions of departure, he heard raised voices from a nearby conference room. He recognized one immediately, Steffy's commanding tone, though it carried an unusual edge of urgency and tension. The other voice was unfamiliar, male and authoritative, but Dick caught enough words to understand that this wasn't a routine business call. "I'm telling you, Chief Baker, this is a sensitive situation," Steffy said, her words clipped and carefully measured. "Dylan's confession was an accident, and she's already cooperated fully with the investigation. Luna's death has caused enough turmoil for this family. There's no need to complicate matters by dragging out details that won't change the outcome." Dick's hand froze mid-motion as he was placing his design sketches into the box. He knew about Luna's death. It had been all over Los Angeles, the talk of everyone from the fashion houses to the restaurants. But this conversation suggested something more, something that Steffy wanted to keep quiet. His curiosity, now thoroughly piqued by a combination of professional hurt and opportunistic instinct, drew him closer to the conference room door. The police chief's voice, though muffled, carried the weight of official procedure. "Ms. Forrester, we have a responsibility to ensure that all facts are properly documented. If there's additional information related to your involvement in this case—" "There is no involvement," Steffy interrupted, her voice dropping to something more vulnerable, almost pleading. "But I won't deny that I made a choice to protect my family." Dylan made a split-second decision that she immediately reported. "The investigation is closed, unless you're suggesting that we reopen it with additional complications," I'm not sure what more you need from me." The implication hung in the air like a dark cloud. Whatever secret Steffi was keeping, whatever her involvement in the Luna situation extended beyond what had been publicly revealed, she was clearly willing to use her influence and perhaps threaten to use her family's resources to keep it buried. Dick's mind raced with possibilities. Was Steffi involved in covering up details about how Luna died? Was there something about the accident that the police didn't know? Was Steffi protecting someone? The realization of leverage. As Dick completed the painful task of packing up his office, the overheard conversation played on repeat in his mind. The initial sting of losing his job had transformed into something else entirely, a sense of empowerment mixed with danger. He possessed something valuable, something that Steffi clearly wanted to remain hidden. In another life, in another moment, he might have dismissed the conversation as none of his business, something to keep private out of basic human decency. But today wasn't that day. Today, Dick was angry, disappointed, and facing an uncertain future. The fashion industry was brutal, and his prospects were suddenly looking very slim. Thomas Forrester had a stellar track record. The Forresters would stand behind him. What did Dick have? Talent, yes, but no family name to back him, no legacy to lean on. He was expendable. As he left Forrester Creations for what felt like the last time, Dick made a decision that would set him on a collision course with consequences he couldn't yet comprehend. He would use what he'd heard, not to hurt Steffi out of malice, but to secure his future. It was a gamble, a dangerous one, but it was also the only card he had left to play. The meeting with Bill Spencer. 3 days later, Dick found himself in the sleek, imposing office of Bill Spencer at Spencer Publications. The billionaire's domain was a study in power and influence, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles, furniture that screamed wealth and importance, and Bill himself, the man who seemed to bend the city's fortunes to his will. "Dick Sharp," Bill said, his voice carrying a note of amusement as he gestured for the younger man to sit. "Not exactly the person I expected to see today. What brings you to my office? And more importantly, how did you get past my assistant?" Dick's heart pounded in his chest as he settled into the chair across from Bill's massive desk. This was the moment where everything would be decided, where he would either secure a path forward or destroy himself in the attempt. He'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his head, but now that he was here, the words felt heavy and dangerous on his tongue. "I came here because I have information," Dick began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Information that I believe would be very valuable to you, especially given your new venture with Katie Logan. I also came here because I'm facing a very uncertain future, and I think we might be able to help each other." Bill's expression shifted, a subtle tightening around his eyes that suggested he was intrigued despite his skepticism. "Go on," he said simply. Dick laid out what he'd heard: Steffi's phone call with the police chief, the suggestion that she was covering up or minimizing details about Luna's death, the implication that her involvement extended beyond what had been publicly disclosed. He wasn't entirely sure what the full truth was, but he knew enough to be dangerous, and Bill Spencer was precisely the kind of man who could wield that danger as a tool. The negotiation. Bill listened without interrupting, his sharp businessman's mind clearly processing the information and calculating its potential value. When Dick finished, Bill leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, a gesture that suggested he was both amused and impressed. "That's quite a play you're making here," Bill said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Blackmail is a serious business, Dick. Are you prepared for the consequences if this goes wrong? If Steffi finds out that you approached me with this information, she will destroy you. And unlike Forrester Creations, which has some family loyalty to navigate, I don't have those constraints." "I'm aware of the risks," Dick replied, though his mouth had gone dry. "But I'm out of options. Steffi made it clear that there's no place for me at Forrester Creations. I can't go to Il Giardino forever. I need a real opportunity, a position that allows me to continue building my career as a designer. When I heard about Katie's new fashion house, I realized that you're building something that could rival Forrester. You're going to need talented people, People who understand design and fashion from the ground up. People like me. Bill stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the Los Angeles skyline. You're proposing that I hire you as a designer for Katie's fashion house in exchange for your discretion about Steffi's potential cover-up? I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement, Dick said carefully. You get a talented designer with fresh perspectives, someone who isn't beholden to Forrester Creations traditions or family dynamics. I get a real opportunity to build something meaningful, and the information I've shared becomes leverage that keeps everyone honest. Bill turned back to face him, and Dick could see the wheels turning behind the billionaire's eyes. This was a man who had built his empire on calculated risks and leveraging information. The scenario Dick had presented was precisely the kind of intricate power play that Bill Spencer lived for. I'll need more details, Bill said finally. Specifics about what you heard, dates, times, exact words if you can remember them. But I'm willing to talk to Katie about bringing you onto her team. However, he added, his voice dropping to something more dangerous, you need to understand that if this information turns out to be less valuable than you've suggested, or if you're playing games with me, the consequences will be far worse than losing a job at Forrester. Dick nodded, understanding that he'd just crossed a line from which there was no turning back. The young designer had made a choice that would reverberate through the fashion industry, through his family, and through his own moral compass in ways he couldn't yet predict. The fallout begins as word began to circulate through the Los Angeles fashion circles that Dick Sharp was joining Katie Spencer's new fashion empire. The reactions were swift and complicated. For Dick, the position at Katie's company represented validation and a second chance. His talent would finally be recognized and utilized, and he would be part of something new and exciting, a fashion house that was already generating buzz and attracting industry attention. For Bill Spencer, the arrangement was equally satisfying. He had acquired a talented designer for his wife's venture, and more importantly, he had secured leverage over Steffy Forrester. Whether he would ever need to use the information Dick had provided remained to be seen, but in Bill's experience, leverage was always valuable to keep on hand. For Steffy, the situation was far more fraught. She remained unaware of what Dick had overheard, unaware of the threat that now loomed over her carefully constructed cover-up. The secret she'd worked so hard to protect was now held by a disgruntled former employee who had every reason to use it if circumstances demanded. It was a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated, a loose thread that could unravel everything. And for Hope Logan, the situation represented another layer of complication in her increasingly difficult relationship with her family's company. Her brother had been fired, and now he was joining a rival fashion house. The lines were being drawn in what was shaping up to be a significant fashion industry rivalry. Conclusion: the dangerous game. Dick Sharp's desperate gamble had achieved its immediate objective. He had secured a position at Katie Spencer's fashion house and extracted himself from the humiliation of professional rejection at Forrester Creations. But he had also entered a dangerous game of leverage and blackmail, one where the stakes were far higher than he had initially understood. The secret about Steffi's involvement in covering up details about Luna's death remained like a loaded weapon, waiting to be deployed at a moment when it might be most damaging. Whether Dick would ever actually use this information, whether it would ever become public, or whether it would simply hang over Steffi's head as a constant source of anxiety remained to be seen. What was certain was that the fashion industry landscape in Los Angeles was about to undergo a significant shift. Katie Logan's new venture had already attracted serious talent and serious opposition from Forrester Creations. The addition of Dick Sharp to the team signaled that this rivalry would be more than just professional, it would be personal, complicated by family ties, blackmail, and the kind of moral ambiguities that made for compelling human drama. As the characters moved forward into this new chapter, each with their own goals, fears, and secrets, the question that hung over everything was simple. How far would they go to protect what they valued most? And what would be the cost when all the secrets, lies, and desperate gambles finally came to light? The Bold and the Beautiful had always been about the collision of personal ambition with family loyalty, of passion with pragmatism. In Dick Sharp's dangerous play for his future, all of these elements converged, setting the stage for a drama that would test the limits of loyalty, decency, and the price of survival in a world where your worth is constantly measured and found wanting. Next, we will learn about the shocking possibility that Finn might find himself dealing with an unexpected and potentially dangerous new stalker situation. The latest spoilers from The Bold and the Beautiful suggest that Dylan, the young woman who recently confessed to the hit-and-run death of Luna Nozawa, may be developing an unhealthy obsession with the handsome doctor. What initially appears to be genuine remorse and gratitude for Finn's compassionate response to her confession could actually be the beginning of something far more sinister and complicated. Dylan's sudden reappearance in the lives of the Forrester and Spencer families has raised numerous eyebrows among longtime viewers of the show. Her claim that she was the driver responsible for Luna's tragic death came as a shock to everyone, especially considering the traumatic history between these two women. Let's not forget the terrifying ordeal Dylan endured when Luna held her captive at the beach house, binding her with ropes and keeping her prisoner in that claustrophobic space. The fear Dylan experienced during those harrowing hours was palpable, and the subsequent shooting incident only amplified her trauma to unimaginable levels. Now Dylan is back in the picture, gravitating toward the very location where her nightmare began. The beach house has become a focal point for her presence, and interestingly enough, it's also where Finn spends a considerable amount of his free time. As an avid swimmer and fitness enthusiast, Finn has made it his daily routine to take morning swims in the ocean, enjoying the therapeutic benefits of the waves and the peaceful solitude of the early hours. This regular habit makes his encounters with Dylan at the beach house seem almost inevitable rather than coincidental. The dynamic between Finn and Dylan has evolved in unexpected ways since her confession. Finn, ever the compassionate healer, responded to Dylan's admission with remarkable understanding and forgiveness. His medical background and innate empathy allow him to see beyond the surface of people's actions, recognizing the complex emotional turmoil that often drives human behavior. He acknowledged the trauma Dylan suffered at Luna's hands and expressed genuine concern for her well-being. This kindness and emotional validation from Finn appears to have struck a deep chord within Dylan, potentially awakening feelings that go far beyond simple gratitude. Dylan's pattern of behavior has become increasingly telling in recent episodes. She seems to materialize wherever Finn happens to be, whether at the beach house or at Forrester Creations, where both frequently find themselves. The fashion house has become another intersection point in their orbits, with Dylan spending more time there under various pretenses. Each encounter is marked by Dylan's profuse apologies and expressions of remorse, but beneath these surface interactions, something else may be brewing. Her body language, the way her eyes linger on Finn just a moment too long, the slight tremor in her voice when she speaks to him, these subtle cues suggest emotions that run deeper than mere thankfulness. The show desperately needs a new obsessive character now that Luna has been written out of the storyline. Luna's dangerous fixation on Will Spencer provided weeks of dramatic tension, and Dylan could easily step into a similar role with Finn as her target. The parallels between Luna's behavior and Dylan's emerging patterns are striking and cannot be ignored. Both women experienced significant trauma. Both found themselves drawn to compassionate men who showed them kindness. And both have the potential for their gratitude to morph into something far more dangerous and possessive. The upcoming episode scheduled for December 26th promises to be particularly significant in this developing storyline. The beach house will serve as the setting for what could be a pivotal scene, with Finn, Steffy Forrester Finnegan, Will Spencer, and Electra Forrester all gathering together. This convergence of characters creates the perfect opportunity for Dylan to insert herself further into Finn's world, perhaps under the guise of coincidence or casual friendship. The preview footage has already given viewers a tantalizing glimpse of what's to come, and the implications are both intriguing and concerning. In the teaser video, Finn can be seen using Will's outdoor shower, rinsing off the salt water and sand after one of his ocean swims. His athletic physique is on full display as the water cascades over his toned body, creating a scene that is both innocent and potentially provocative, depending on who might be watching. While Dylan has likely never witnessed Finn in such a vulnerable and revealing state before, circumstances are aligning to change that reality. The question becomes, what will Dylan's reaction be when she catches sight of Finn's impressive beach body? Will she be able to maintain appropriate boundaries, or will this visual catalyst ignite something within her that has been smoldering beneath the surface? Imagine a scenario where Dylan begins following a trajectory similar to Luna's pursuit of Will. Picture her starting to show up at the cliff house at strategically chosen times, perhaps when she knows Steffy is away at work or occupied with business matters. These casual drop-ins could initially seem harmless enough, with Dylan offering to help with various tasks or simply checking in to continue her ongoing apology tour. But gradually, the visits could become more frequent, more intimate, and more calculated. Dylan might begin positioning herself as an indispensable presence in the household, particularly when it comes to the children. She could volunteer to babysit Hayes and Kelly, demonstrating her nurturing side and maternal instincts. Or perhaps she'll offer tutoring services, helping the kids with their schoolwork or teaching them new skills. By making herself useful and embedding herself into the family's daily routine, Dylan could slowly become a fixture in their lives, someone they come to depend on without fully recognizing the dangerous undercurrents of her motivations. The shower scenario presents particularly dramatic possibilities for future episodes. What if one day Dylan arrives at the cliff house and discovers Finn in the shower, the steam rising and the water running? In a moment of boldness fueled by obsession, she might cross an unforgivable line, sliding the shower door open and stepping inside with him. The shock on Finn's face, the violation of his privacy and personal space, the awkward confrontation that would inevitably follow such a scene would create explosive drama and force all the characters to confront the reality of Dylan's unhealthy fixation. But we must ask ourselves, is Dylan's confession to Finn about killing Luna genuinely motivated by guilt and remorse? Or is it actually a carefully orchestrated scheme designed to create a connection between them? By positioning herself as vulnerable and seeking his forgiveness, Dylan may have found the perfect strategy to get closer to Finn, to spend time with him, and to gradually work her way into his life and heart. The confession creates a bond between them, a shared secret and emotional experience that Steffy is not part of, potentially driving a wedge between the married couple. Dylan's presence could begin causing subtle tensions in Finn and Steffy's marriage. Steffy might notice Dylan's frequent appearances and feel uncomfortable with how often this young woman seems to be around her husband. She could sense something off about Dylan's constant need to be near Finn, her excessive apologies, and her lingering gazes. As a mother and wife, Steffy's protective instincts would naturally kick in, leading to confrontations and difficult conversations with Finn about appropriate boundaries. The show's writers have an opportunity to explore the psychological complexity of obsession and trauma. Dylan experienced genuine terror at Luna's hands, and that trauma may have left her emotionally unstable and vulnerable to developing unhealthy attachments. Finn's kindness might represent safety and validation to her damaged psyche, creating a desperate need to be near him and to secure his continued protection and approval. This psychological dimension adds layers to what could otherwise be a straightforward stalker storyline. Could Dylan actually be more similar to Luna than anyone initially realized? Both women have demonstrated capacity for extreme behavior when pushed to their limits. Luna kidnapped and imprisoned Dylan, then escalated to murder. Dylan now claims to have committed vehicular homicide. The darkness within both characters suggests they may share personality traits that make them capable of crossing lines that others wouldn't dare approach. If Dylan is indeed developing an obsession with Finn, she may prove just as dangerous and unpredictable as Luna was with Will. The coming weeks promise explosive developments as this storyline unfolds. Viewers should watch carefully for the subtle signs of Dylan's growing fixation, the frequency of her appearances, the intensity of her focus on Finn, and her reactions when Steffy is present versus when she has Finn alone. The beach house scenes, the Forrester Creations encounters, and any potential visits to the Cliff House will all provide clues about Dylan's true intentions and mental state. This could be the beginning of another dangerous obsession storyline that will keep fans on the edge of their seats throughout the new year.